Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty incredible, a prophecy about China's collapse, made 30 years ago. And the crazy part? This warning didn't come from some outsider. It came from one of the most powerful leaders inside the system.
I mean, just listen to that. I have lost hope in the party. This is coming from Zhao Ziyang, a guy who was literally at the top of China's political food chain. This isn't just some random criticism, right? This is a final judgment, delivered from the very heart of the machine.
So that's the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did he see all this coming decades in advance? Well, the answers are hidden away in secret audio tapes. Tapes he recorded himself while he was under house arrest for the last 15 years of his life. It's an incredible story. Okay, so let's start with the diagnosis itself, because this is really where you see his amazing intellectual journey. I mean, he goes from being a total party loyalist to becoming its sharpest, most insightful critic. So while he was cut off from the world, Zhao had this massive realization. He figured out that the core of the problem was the party-state system itself. You know, where the party and the government are basically the same thing. He saw it as being fundamentally incompatible with being a modern country. It's like trying to run a high-tech sports car on crude oil. He knew you just couldn't have a thriving modern economy when the party puts itself above every law. He was convinced one was eventually going to destroy the other. And he really dug deep. He pinpointed what he saw as a fatal bug in the system's source code, and he broke it down into 3 core flaws that he believed were totally unfixable. All right, let's unpack this. First, he says the party acts like it's above the law, a total superpower. Second, he argues that Deng Xiaoping's famous economic reforms, those weren't really about modernizing the country for the people's sake. They were a clever, practical move just to keep the party from collapsing. And third, and this is key, when you take that kind of unchecked political power and you throw it into a market economy, well, you inevitably get this massive, sprawling crony capitalism. For Zhao, these 3 things together created a feedback loop, a system that was totally incapable of ever fixing its own problems. And that brings us to what he called the core paradox, this idea of self-supervision. Think about it. How can a ruling party police itself? Zhao said it's logically impossible. Without any external checks, like an opposition party, a free press, or courts that are actually independent, the party just can't be held accountable. He believed any so-called anti-corruption campaign on the inside is just a power struggle, right? It's one faction using the rules to take out its rivals, not genuine reform. Okay, so that was the diagnosis from 30 years ago. Now let's jump to today, because what's really spooky is just how uncannily accurate his predictions are turning out to be, especially under Xi Jinping. And what's fascinating is you have 2 totally opposite prescriptions for the exact same illness. Zhao's cure was to decentralize, to spread out the power, and to lean into the rule of law. Xi's prescription? It's the polar opposite: totalitarian control and political purges. It's like he's trying to cure the disease of over-centralization with a fatal dose of even more centralization. And, well, you can probably guess the consequences. Instead of getting fixed, corruption just mutates. It's not about simple bribes anymore. Now it's about proving your political loyalty to get ahead. The very soul of the market, predictable rules, contracts you can trust, it's being shattered. We saw this with the huge crackdowns on tech and education. Entire industries practically vanished overnight, all because the leader's will became more important than any law. So what happens? The private sector gets spooked, retreats, and the whole economic engine starts to sputter. And this is exactly what Zhao was talking about all those years ago. He saw this coming, a system that desperately wants all the benefits of a market economy, but completely rejects its heart and soul, which is the rule of law. He warned that this kind of twisted system would just become a breeding ground for corruption and eventually massive social conflict. So, all of this brings us to the verdict from the people themselves. And it's not what you might think. We're not talking about loud protests in the streets. It's something much quieter, much more systemic. It's a rejection of the regime from the ground up, coming from the very generation the system needs to fuel its future. It really crystallized around this phrase, the last generation. A young guy actually said this to the police during the brutal Shanghai lockdown, and it just went viral. It's this incredibly powerful, quiet form of protest. It's young people basically saying, nope, we're not going to have kids. We refuse to supply you with more human ore to feed your system. It's about breaking that chain of control. And then there's this other thing, this whole movement called runology, literally the study of how to run away, how to get out of China. And again, this isn't just a few people immigrating. This is a massive vote of no confidence, with people using their feet and their money. You see it in the exploding online searches for how to emigrate, and then the reports of huge amounts of money leaving the country. We're talking about the talent, the wealth, the ideas, all draining away, hollowing out the very foundation of the regime.
And here's the really crucial part. You could call this a soft kill. It's a form of resistance that the party's usual playbook just can't handle. I mean, tanks and police are great for crushing a protest, but you can't point a gun at someone and force them to get married or have kids or invest their money and start a new company. It just doesn't work.
So, the regime is facing this slow, creeping internal decay. And according to the source material we're looking at, this might push them towards a final, desperate, high-stakes gamble, a way to try and change the story and rally everyone to their side. And what's that gamble? An invasion of Taiwan? But here's the twist. The thinking is that an external war, instead of saving the regime, would probably be the suicide button that triggers a super fast, total internal collapse. So, why would that be? Let's get into it. Well, for a few big reasons. A war wouldn't just be a war. It would be like hitting a switch that activates all the internal problems we've been talking about. First, you've got the one-child army. Almost every soldier is an only child. So every single casualty isn't just a soldier lost, it's an entire family's future gone, which could cause a massive backlash at home. Second, the economy would be strangled almost overnight. A blockade of the Malacca Strait would cut off oil and food, and the whole thing could just implode. And finally, there's the military itself. The recent purges hint that it might be a paper tiger, riddled with corruption. There are these insane reports of missiles being filled with water instead of fuel and silo lids that literally can't launch. You can't win a war like that.
So, when you put it all together, the regime looks like it's caught between a rock and a hard place. They have two potential paths to the end. There's the slow death, just this long, drawn-out period of economic stagnation and social decay. Or there's the fast death, that super high-risk invasion of Taiwan that could cause everything to collapse, quickly and violently. And that brings us right back to where we started, to Zhao Ziyang's prophecy from 30 years ago. If he was right, if that fatal bug in the system's code is real, if it's a system that truly cannot fix itself, then its collapse might not be a question of if, but when. And the only real question left is, what will that crash look like?